It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Hundreds of homes and businesses are underwater as Storm Bert brings devastation to large parts of the country. The bodies of 2 people have been recovered from the floods. A major incident is declared in Wales, with some people being warned tonight that their tap water may be contaminated. We hear the dramatic story of a father who was forced to flee for his life with his baby son after their car began flooding with water.
So I've run down the window, climbed out, run down his window, pulled him out, and the water was about chest high.
Assisted dying debate. The MP behind the bill rejects claims it's a slippery slope towards death on demand. A last-minute deal at COP29 as global climate talks are pulled back from the brink of collapse. In sport, new Manchester United manager Ruben Amorim sees his team fail to beat Ipswich in his first game in charge. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages and our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. Hundreds of homes and businesses are underwater tonight after Storm Bert caused flooding in some parts of the country. A man in his 80s died after being recovered from the water in Lancashire, while the body of a dog walker who was swept away in North Wales has also been found. South Wales was one of the most badly affected areas, with a major incident being declared. Tonight, there is a warning to some people in Wales to boil their tap water because it may be contaminated. Now, tonight, 2 severe flood warnings have been issued in Wales, meaning that there could be a danger to life. And there have been over 160 flood warnings. That's in areas where flooding is expected. More than 200 flood alerts have been issued across the UK, meaning that there is a possibility of flooding. The National Grid says more than 3,000 homes are still without power due to high winds and rain, with the southwest worst affected. In some areas, they've seen close to a month's worth of rainfall in just 48 hours, including South Wales and on Dartmoor. Our correspondent, Dan Whitehead, has spent the day in the Welsh town of Pontypridd, where Storm Bert has caused widespread flooding.
The water flooded in faster than they could bail it out. Residents in the valley town of Pontypridd rallied together as emergency services responded to the devastation of Storm Bert. Many angry at what they feel was a lack of preparation.
Put a flood defence in instead of a Harry Potter fence. Do your job, what we paid them money for.
As you can see, National Resources Wales have just replaced the railings back again. He doesn't do anything. As soon as he goes, it comes in through there again.
Nice.
8 o'clock this morning I was told to move my car. And I moved my car safely. But 8 o'clock this morning, but it was already coming in.
The council here declared a major incident on Sunday. Extra resource was deployed and rest centres set up nearby. A lot of people have only just repaired their homes after the last big flood in 2020. Now they're back to square one, but it's not just houses that have been ruined. Businesses have been destroyed here as well. For garage owner Gareth, his whole business has been lost overnight.
Our drum's obviously gone over and the oil's spilt everywhere.
Everything's coated in oil. Many of his customers' cars, now write-offs.
But I'm gutted. Obviously, it's... How long is it going to take to sort it out, and I'm going to lose money either way, and and the time to take all it, I can't work on people's cars when I'm trying to sort all this out. It's devastating.
It's not just Pontypridd affected. In North Wales, a body was found by police officers searching for a 75-year-old man who'd been walking his dog near the River Conwy. Across South Wales, flooding caused landslides and swept cars away.
Well, we certainly knew Storm Bert was coming, so there was an amount of preparation. But when you get the kind of enormity of rain that we've had over the past few days, and it's still coming down, then we've got to recognise that it is going to be difficult.
There are still hundreds of flood warnings in place across the UK. As Storm Bert moves on, its impact may be felt for days to come. Dan Whitehead, Sky News, in Pontypridd, South Wales.
Well, there's also been severe flooding in parts of Yorkshire. One man told Sky News today of his terror as his car filled up with floodwater with his 11-month-old baby inside. Our North of England correspondent Shingi Mararike reports.
After the snow came the rain, with this road in West Yorkshire starting the day submerged. And the Environment Agency warning people in the area about the risk of flooding. 2 days of treacherous conditions have left their mark, not just in the form of soaked streets and rising river levels, but in their impact on people who have had near misses. Like Andre, who was travelling through Todmorden with his 11-month-old son when this happened.
I just took my seatbelt off and went for it.
Andre and his partner Paige have hopes for their family and their future. If it wasn't for his quick thinking, things could have been so different for him and baby Luca.
Saw water rising and it just clicked in my head, I need to get me and my baby out of here safe. So I've worn down the window, climbed out, worn down his window, pulled him out, and the water was about chest high. And then, so I've carried him above my head to make sure he hasn't touched any of the water or anything to try and keep him dry and warm.
To think that I could have actually lost them both makes me a bit emotional. Yeah, it's really scary. It's just a horrible thing to think about, isn't it?
The water had messed up with the electricity in the car. I think now, like, would the windows have wound down? Would I have had to spend time trying to smash a window before the water got too high? It's scary to think about.
The Calder Valley's geography means that it's an area prone to flooding, with a river running through it and its steep hillsides. That means the people who live here are used to the alerts and warnings. Even if this time the flooding was contained to smaller pockets of the area, the regular warnings are why some residents have taken matters into their own hands.
They know the wall, needs hiring, but yet they're not prepared to put any funding into it. And every year, we sit here in fear, not just us, but the older people as well that live on here, and they sit there in fear every time it rains and becomes heavy because they think they're going to get flooded.
The worst of our weather always adds to community concerns. And as the water recedes here, there won't just be relief, but more questions too. Shingi Marike, Sky News, Todmorden.
The MP, whose assisted dying bill will be debated in Parliament this week, has rejected claims that the proposed legislation is a slippery slope towards death on demand. The Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, made the claim in a letter to her constituents. But today, Kim Leadbeater, the Labour MP behind the bill, told Sky News any new law would contain strict controls to ensure it cannot be misused. Our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, reports.
The vote on assisted dying is personal for people like Sophie, who has terminal cancer.
What I don't want to be is in pain. I don't want to be my body shutting down on me, my organs shutting down on me, not being able to breathe properly, just every indignity that can happen to the human body. I don't want that. It should be, I believe, my choice to be able to have a compassionate death.
The Cabinet is split, but the Welfare Secretary is for it.
I voted for the bill the last time it was debated, and I'll be voting for it again. I think the safeguards in the bill are much stronger than last time, and I've always believed in giving people as much power, control and choice over the things that matter to them as possible.
This weekend, the Justice Secretary made a high-profile intervention against, telling a constituent that what she called a slippery slope to death on demand would put vulnerable people under undue pressure. The author of the bill MPs will debate rejected this argument.
In terms of the concept of a slippery slope, the title of the bill is very, very clear. It is called Terminally Ill Adults End of Life Bill. It cannot include anybody other than people who are terminally ill with a number of months of their life left to live.
The government must officially stay neutral on this issue, but we understand some 10 cabinet ministers are likely to support the bill. Others have expressed opposition or concerns about the safeguards, and many, including the Prime Minister, have not confirmed either way. The mood in Parliament is getting increasingly fraught. Health Secretary Wes Streeting shook up the debate by saying it would cost the NHS money and that palliative care was not good enough to give patients a real choice. But each MP will make their own decision and the numbers could still go either way. That's a big concern for people living with disability like Lucy, who fear that the scope could later change, as it has in other countries.
All around the world, if you look at places where these bills have been introduced, they've been broadened and broadened and broadened. I don't know a single disabled person who has not, at some point, had a stranger come up to us and say, if I really like to kill myself.
The vote is 5 days away, but the strong feelings on either side may have many more chapters to run.
And Tamara joins us now from Westminster. Tamara, this is such an important week for campaigners on both sides of the debate.
Yes, tensions will be running high in Parliament this week as MPs make this momentous decision. And in meeting rooms all over the Palace of Westminster, there will be meetings with medics, with lawyers, with campaigners, with people in heartbreaking situations on all sides, making the arguments, weighing on MPs as they talk to each other, they talk to constituents, and they make their decision in Friday's vote. Today, we had an intervention from faith leaders, 29 of them Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Sikh and Hindu, in a Sunday newspaper, saying they are worried the Assisting Dying Bill will lead to life-threatening abuse and coercion of elderly and vulnerable people. Now, the people supporting this bill say the safeguards will be the strictest anywhere in the world. You need to have a diagnosis of terminal illness, less than 6 months to live, 2 doctors and a High Court judge to agree it. But those wavering MPs are also being told this. I've spoken to some of the MPs who are for it tonight. They feel their side is growing in optimism that it will pass. They say they are telling MPs that this is not the end of the process if they vote for it on Friday. There will be months more scrutiny. There will be further votes. There could be changes to how it actually works. And they are saying to MPs, don't slam the door now when we could have more of this debate. Now, opponents will be concerned by that, saying once you cross the line, it's very hard to come back. But that is the debate being had among MPs, and there are only 5 days to go until they have to make this fateful decision.
Tamara Cohen in Westminster. Tamara, thank you. After days of wrangling, a last-minute deal pulled the COP29 climate talks from the brink of collapse. In the dying hours of the meeting in Azerbaijan, a new finance package was agreed, but some developing countries say it's not nearly enough. Well, let's take a look at the details of that deal. Before the talks in Azerbaijan, the finance pledge from rich countries to developing nations was $100 billion a year by 2020. Now, the aim of the funding is to help poorer countries decarbonize and adapt to extreme weather. Well, the latest round of negotiations successfully tripled climate finance to $300 billion a year by 2035. The agreement also included a plan to raise $1.3 trillion a year by 2035, but this would be from new sources of money that are yet to be agreed. Our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, reports.
Just a few hours before, it seemed impossible.
0.22.
But a deal on climate finance was finally reached in Baku. Don't be fooled by the applause. After 2 weeks of deadlock, this is relief, not rejoicing. For a deal so bad, so unpopular, it was forced through without allowing objections.
This has been stage managed, and we are extremely, extremely disappointed with this incident.
On paper, the deal triples the $100 billion a year currently available to help poor countries address climate change they didn't cause. Rich donors promise this will attract the $1.3 trillion they accept is needed by 2035. Poor countries are far from convinced, but it's the only deal around.
This is the only space that we have to negotiate and to work towards our common goals. We accepted the text. because we could not leave Baku without a text, but we're not satisfied whatsoever.
This deal on finance, however weak, does signal the growing momentum away from fossil fuels and an acceptance that climate impacts in the developing world ultimately affect us all. A big step forward for this global talking shop. But for the 3 decades it's been going, this process has always been several steps behind its stated objective, preventing dangerous levels of global warming. The events of this year, the first to be 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial average temperatures, attest to the fact that warming is already upon us.
Looking back over the past, say, 10 years, we were heading for well over 3 degrees of warming, and we're now heading for maybe 2.5. So, that's not only down to the COP, that's down to all sorts of things, but the COP's clearly had an impact there. There's a very big gap between where we're going and what would be needed for 1.5, and it's a really big test for countries' ambition, for their commitment to this process.
The next round of talks, COP30, are in Belém, Brazil, in a year from now, and in a world a few fractions of a degree warmer still. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Let's bring you some breaking news now. A British man has reportedly been captured by Russian forces while fighting for Ukraine. In a widely circulated video first posted on Telegram, the man identifies himself as 22-year-old James Scott Rees-Anderson and says he is a former British soldier. He says he signed up to fight for Ukraine's International Legion after losing his job. The Foreign Office said it was supporting the family of a British man following reports of his detention. And we will bring you more details on this developing story as we get them. In other news, 3 people have been arrested following the killing of an Israeli Moldovan rabbi who went missing in the United Arab Emirates. Zvi Kogan, who worked in the country for an Orthodox Jewish organization, disappeared on Thursday. The Israeli Prime Minister said the 28-year-old was kidnapped and murdered in an anti-Semitic incident.
I want to express deep shock on my behalf, on behalf of all the members of the government, on behalf of all the citizens of Israel, on behalf of the entire people of Israel, at the kidnapping and murder of the late Zvi Kogan. May God avenge him. This murder was committed in the United Arab Emirates. The murder of an Israeli citizen and Chabad emissary is an abhorrent anti-Semitic terrorist attack. I also sent my heartfelt condolences to the Kogan family on your behalf.
Police in London say a man who was initially believed to have been stabbed on Westminster Bridge had actually suffered a cardiac arrest. Officers were called to a fight on the bridge in central London this morning. The man remains in hospital in a critical condition. 3 people were arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and 1 on suspicion of a fray. A Russian-made passenger plane has caught fire after landing at Turkey's Antalya airport tonight. The Turkish Transport Ministry said all 89 passengers and 6 crew members were safely evacuated from the aircraft. There's a warning today that Russia could turn off the lights for millions of people if it decides to launch a cyber attack. Pat McFadden, a senior member of the government, is hosting a NATO security summit in London tomorrow. He will tell delegates that Moscow will not think twice about using a cyber attack to weaken Western support for Ukraine. This report now from Emma Birchley.
When hackers stole sensitive patient data in a cyber attack on blood testing services in June, the impact reverberated through the NHS in London. Thousands of operations and outpatient appointments were postponed. Russia was blamed, as it has been for targeting the UK's energy infrastructure, its political institutions, the media, telecoms. It means for all President Putin's recent talk of unstoppable missiles and the lowering of the threshold for nuclear weapon use, the unseen threat may well be just as dangerous.
Russia will do everything in its power to destabilise not only within Ukraine, but amongst the NATO allies. So we have to be absolutely vigilant in that as a government, but also in businesses and wider society to protect against those cyber hacktivists.
It's that unseen risk that a leading member of the government will emphasise at a NATO conference on Monday. In his speech, Pat McFadden will leave no doubt that the threat is real, that a Russian cyber attack has the power to switch off the lights for millions. But there'll be a warning for Vladimir Putin too, that the United Kingdom and others in the room know exactly what Russia are doing and are watching. He'll also make clear to his audience at Lancaster House that such attacks are being countered both publicly and behind the scenes, although it seems unlikely that'll deter the Russian president.
I think Putin, who is the head of a very small mafia-like clique running a whole country, is interested in his own personal survival, his own wealth, and that of that group. And he will do what he can to protect himself. And if he thinks that cyber attacks are a way to do that, he will do it, even though it's reckless and dangerous.
The capacity to disrupt has already been seen. It may be a hidden war, but the message is clear. Its potential impact must not be underestimated. Emma Birchley, Sky News, Central London.
The potential health issues posed by breathing in microplastics in the home have been highlighted today in new research seen by Sky News. Doing everyday tasks like sorting through laundry or doing a workout could expose us to more than 100 tiny particles of plastic every minute. Now, they're too small to see, and the health impacts are not yet really known. Our science and medical correspondent Thomas Moore explains.
This filter will capture all of the particles in the air.
Even in your own home, you're surrounded by microplastic. New research using machines to filter the air shows everyday activities like folding synthetic clothes stir up a cloud of fibres and fragments too small to see. But they're revealed under a microscope.
This white fibre is a plastic one. This is polyethylene tetraphthalate, the same kind of plastic that makes plastic bottles.
Results seen by Sky News show just dealing with the laundry, we breathe in 7 pieces of microplastic deep into our lungs every minute.
We know that they have negative implications at very high concentrations. What we don't know, of course, is what concentration that would be in a home setting. And if we are exposed every day for our whole lives and we live to 80, 90 years old, what does it mean by that stage? It's not just a single event where we are exposed for a day or two. This is our whole lives. We will be breathing them in.
A workout is even worse. You'd breathe in 110 plastic pieces every minute if you did it on a synthetic carpet, according to the research at the University of Portsmouth. Multiple studies have found microplastic in the body, including joints, blood vessels, body organs, and even the brain. Scientists are scrambling to understand the impact on our health.
Even sitting on the sofa releases a plume of particles. Microplastics are in the air, in the food, in the water. They have been building up in the environment for 80 years, and they could take centuries to break down and disappear.
The United Nations is so concerned by plastic pollution that it wants a treaty to deal with the problem. Global talks this week aim to agree on more prudent use of plastic and better recycling, but the UK is among just over 40 countries that also want cuts in production. This scientist who's advising the talks says that's essential.
There just simply isn't the capacity in the world to deal with this amount of plastic products and this amount of plastic waste that's being generated at the moment. I think most people recognise plastic has a lot of value to society, and I don't think anybody is saying we need to remove plastic entirely, but it's about managing it adequately so it doesn't become waste.
There is growing concern about what happens to the plastic in our homes and the wider environment. The industry and countries that produce oil, the raw ingredient for plastic, oppose cuts. But production is currently predicted to treble by 2050, and scientists warn that's just not sustainable. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Portsmouth.
Let's get the latest sport now from Sky Sports News and Rahul.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
2 England internationals. One, in theory, delicious recipe. One fierce cooking challenge to mark the ECB's Taste of Cricket campaign. What could possibly go wrong?
Here in the kitchen, Jamie and Izzy making, Izzy?
Banana pancakes.
Which apparently is your recipe, which seems unfair on Jamie.
Only if it's good.
Given that this is your recipe, I want some tips for him before we start.
There isn't really any measurements.
Good start.
We just kind
this
of
is encouraging.
Go on feel.
So, banana pancakes on the menu, and Izzy taking a loose approach to both methods and measurements.
It's like they say vanilla's like the garlic of baking. Vanilla extract is to baking what garlic is to cooking. If it says 3, put in 6.
When you say they, who is they?
Just people.
People.
Yeah.
Cooking people.
At all levels, cricket and cuisine are intrinsically linked. For the pros, it's all about being well fueled for a long day in the fields.
Literally 6, 7, 8 hours of cricket in a day. Need your carbs, need your good nutrition. Otherwise, at the end of the day, you've got to use the food to perform as best as you can.
Away from the top table, though, the English cricket tea forms the staple diet of summer Saturdays up and down the country. The ECB celebrated all sorts of communities and cookery this year and rewarded those clubs that have excelled in terms of inclusion, with the social element always right at the heart of things.
Tea's like you play a hard game, cricket, and it's just about coming together at tea, socialising with your mates, socialising with the opposition, and having a bite to eat. Having some probably not so healthy things on a Saturday compared to England, but yeah, it's great.
What's your favourite tea item that you've ever had? Any club in the
Any club? I don't know, you know. What's
played
yours?
at Worthfield in Shropshire.
Yeah.
They have the best homemade Rocky Road you have ever had. They have a one that has a little bit of raspberry in it, I think, and a normal one.
Some classic flavour combinations there, but here a slightly more experimental feel.
Just to confirm, this is going to include peanut butter, chocolate, and chilli.
And McVitie's going to trademark this.
I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit concerned about this.
Whilst Jamie brings the heat with his chilies, it's almost time to get cooking, and the temperature may rise for the men's disability team with a World Cup in India in the coming months. It's a country that's embraced the women's game in recent years, and both global and franchise tournaments have succeeded in bringing cultures together.
It's not very often you get to go and experience other cultures, other foods, and cricket's a great thing for that. It's a game for everybody, and so is food at the end of the day.
A little bit of movement there, Jamie. That looks encouraging. Still raw.
And for the moment of truth, it feels fitting to find a guest judge who's experienced a range of cultures across his cricketing career. Born in Barbados, blossoming in Birmingham, England's newest white ball star, Jacob Bethel.
Right, Jacob. Hope we're hungry. Lunch is served. Wow. Here we go. Izzy and Jamie have been slaving away for...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by political journalist Theo Usherwood and barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry. Among the stories we'll be discussing, Storm Bert has caused chaos nationwide. We'll take a look at how the papers are covering that story. We'll be right back.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. I've witnessed migration across Europe close up.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Free, wherever you get your news.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Seagal?
I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent. Sky News,
the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent.
Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited,
Hello,
Tom Cruise.
Katie Spencer, Sky News in London.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
Yes.
Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Dense, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. 2 men have died and hundreds of properties have been flooded after Storm Bert brought torrential rain to large swathes of the country. The MP, whose assisted dying bill will be debated in Parliament this week, has rejected claims by the Justice Secretary that the proposed legislation is a slippery slope towards death on demand. And countries have agreed last-minute finance deal at the COP29 climate summit. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with political journalist Theo Usherwood and barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry. Welcome both. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Telegraph leads with a call by a former Met Police commissioner to review the use of non-crime hate incidents. The Eye reports on the assisted dying bill that is up for a vote next week, saying it is dividing the cabinet. The Metro leads with its campaign to address the rise in violence against women and girls. Meanwhile, the Mirror leads with their campaign for more regulation on beauty procedures. The Guardian says a defiant Rachel Reeves will rebuke critics of her tax-rising budget, telling business leaders that they have offered no alternatives. The Daily Mail leads on allegations that the GMB union has been branded a viper's nest, with the head accused of bullying. The Daily Star's front warns the UK is set to be battered by more storms in December. And the Sun's front features the mystery of Bobby Moore's missing 1966 World Cup shirt that was believed to be worth over £1 million. And the Times reports that Labour's tax rises in the budget are putting bosses off hiring employees. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Theo Usherwood and Anna Subri. Thank you both so much for being with us on, even in London, it's incredibly windy, although obviously we are not suffering what other people around the country. So let's start with the coverage of Storm Bert. Let's pull up the front page of the Daily Telegraph. And the picture actually, this I believe is Devon. Devon and obviously Wales, especially South Wales, really battered. Anna, what have you made, obviously, of the events, but also the coverage?
Well, it's not really, to be honest, it's on a number of our front pages. And as you say, this is on the front of the Telegraph. In fact, identical photograph is also on the front of the Guardian as well. But and it's clearly going to be one of those stories that we're going to learn more about as through the night and tomorrow morning. But I mean, there is chaos on our railways, for example. I noticed that East Midlands Railways across country have also cancelled huge numbers of trains, leaving passengers genuinely stranded with no form of replacement buses. So there'll be some big stories about that. In the meantime, there are a number of communities, notably in South Wales, and deaths, which have really suffered hugely from extreme flooding. And it's a serious crisis there. No doubt that crisis will get worse and it will spread to other parts of Britain as well.
Yes, I mean, 5 people dead. We've got 100 millimetres of rain in South Wales, 100 flood warnings right across the country. I think this is going to be a test for Keir Starmer going into the week. He's going to have to act quickly. We saw the anger that spread in Spain around the Valencia region when we had those floods, and the governments were seen to be slow to act. The arguments between regional governments and the national government about who was responsible for the clean-up. And if you look at the front page of the Telegraph with that photograph of that woman mopping out the rain from her front garden, and then the devastation, I can only call it that, in Pontypridd, with the cars, absolutely, There's nowhere to go. I mean, the streets are flooded. It looks sort of 4 or 5 feet deep. And I think, it's going to be interesting to see how Starmer responds, how quickly the response can be to get people's livelihoods back up and running again.
And this is the future. I mean, you see, all the way through, certainly my lifetime, we were told, well, these events happen once in every 50 years or 100 years. This is actually happening not just even once a year. This is a regular occurrence. And how we deal with it, how we live with what is, in my view, undoubtedly a result of the change in our climate, is, as you say, rightly a test of government. But it's a conversation we've got to have as a country as to what we want and how we are, if we are going to have to change our lives to accommodate these big climatic changes.
Let's move on now to the Eye front page. And the story that will obviously, I think, occupy probably the headlines for the coming week, the vote on the assisted dying bill on Friday. And here, the headline, Cabinet split over assisted dying as vote row deepens. And we've had various ministers, the Justice Secretary, the last one, coming out with their own opinions on this. What do you make of this?
The thing what we're not actually debating is the merits or otherwise of this private members' bill. And it's only the first part of it that will be debated on Friday. Instead, and Theo will know much more about this than I do, but how on earth has the Cabinet, the government, got itself into a position where the front page of the Eye, the story, is the fact that the Cabinet is split? That strikes me as a government that has handled this wrongly, because the government said it's not going to bring in this legislation. It will facilitate the...
It will allow time. So if it was to be filibustered on... Sorry, Anna. If it was to be filibustered on Friday, if it was to be talked out on Friday, the government would basically say, right, we'll bring our own legislation mirroring Kim Ledbetter's legislation, and we can bring that in government time on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So they'll allow time for it, but it will still, that will only happen if the legislation on Friday is talked out by MPs who are opposing.
Which it could be, as we both know. Yeah. There are procedures that will be put in place, and I think there is a good argument that we've not really had a proper national debate about this, and instead we're getting ourselves into this debate about which member of the Cabinet feels more outraged or otherwise by this bill, which, in my opinion, is a very sensible measure. But we're not actually debating the actual
Well, that's what Sir Edward Lee said, actually, quite recently. Hasn't been enough time to consider the complexities
No,
of this.
forgive me, he would say that, in my view, because he's vehemently opposed to it. Then, let's have that debate publicly. It's not... Parliament will have the time, because it will go through different stages, both in the House of Commons and then in the House of Lords. It goes into what we call the committee stage, which is really when you get really stuck into that legislation in proper detail. So the time is there. I think that's a bit of a red herring. What concerns me, though you could say, well, actually, opinion polls show the majority of people support the bill, that we're just not having the debate out here, and instead it's all about the government's tearing itself. It looks like it's tearing itself to pieces. It shouldn't be.
In
this is a mistake.
In the Daily Telegraph, the headline is assisted dying bill likely to pass.
And that's the irony of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the team around Kim Leadbeater and who are running the campaign, they've obviously done the numbers. They've spoken to MPs right across the House of Commons from all the various parties, and they've come to the conclusion that if everybody does as they say they're going to do, and of course that's never guaranteed in the House of Commons, but if everybody does as they say they're going to do, then the legislation will pass. And that, I think, has always been the feeling, that this time around the legislation will pass. It was last a vote in 2015. It didn't at that point. MPs didn't vote in favour. But, from the numbers and given where public opinion is, 65% of the public in favour of this introduction of assisted dying, that actually this legislation, I think, will pass at second reading on Friday and ultimately come into law, you'd think, sometime in the first half of next year. But when I look at this legislation, you look at and I think Anna's quite right to pick up the front page of the Eye and this cabinet split of Wes Street and Shabana Mahmood on the one hand, and then apparently 14 other cabinet ministers who are actually supportive. And Keir Starmer, meanwhile, is there drumming his fingers saying, well, I've previously supported it, now I'm going to look through legislation line by line. Actually, I think the government should have owned this. I think it should be their legislation.
Really good.
It's a seismic piece of legislation, and it is whichever side of the debate you're on.
We don't have a lot of time, but let me just bring Anna in on this.
I let you down
issue
on
of
this,
the private members bill.
Well, beforehand,
I know
we were talking.
Exactly.
I should explain to people at home, and I said, of course, these are matters of conscience, and normally private members bill, as indeed in '67 with the Abortion Act, the legalised abortion in our country. But then, of course, I said to you, same-sex marriage. That was a bill that was introduced and successfully passed, very proud to have voted for it, by the coalition government of 2010 into 2015. And it was Theo who said, why didn't the Labour government bring this forward? It's a very modest measure, in my opinion, and lead the debate. And I think I think he's right on that.
Okay. Well,
we agree.
Oh, no. Anyway, well, it'll obviously be discussed at length all week, and we are expecting the vote on Friday. Let's move on to the front page of The Guardian. No alternative to raising tax, defiant Chancellor to tell the CBI. Now, obviously, this linked to the budget and the tax rises there, or various changes. We saw the protests of farmers earlier on this week. There was the private sector output has shrunk for the first time in a year. Theo, tell us about this particular story.
Well, Rachel Reeves is going to be addressing the CBI, which is, of course, the main business lobby group, and she's going to be making in London tomorrow, and she's going to be making, of course, the point that it was necessary to increase national insurance contributions for employers to raise £25 billion. And this comes, of course, as the CBI has done its own survey of 266 companies, which suggests that nearly two-thirds are now reconsidering their recruitment plans. Rachel Reeves wants to go for growth, but the message from businesses and the message she's going to hear tomorrow from Ray Newton-Smith, who, of course, runs the CBI, is actually by increasing tax in this way, employers are now saying, hold on, we're not quite so sure about taking on more people. And that, of course, goes to Rachel Reeves' whole, raison d'etre as Chancellor, and that's for economic growth. And it doesn't look like she's going to get it if you're listening to business.
And that is the exact line that the Daily Telegraph is going with in its front page. Two-thirds of companies slash hiring plans after Reeves's budget. So front page of the Telegraph there. Anna.
But then, as she tells The Guardian, maybe in the Telegraph as well,
She says, I've heard lots of responses to the government's first budget, but I have heard no alternatives. What is the alternative? This government said they weren't going to put up personal taxation, personal national insurance. I think the mistake that Labour made was when the Conservatives cut national insurance on employees by a very people barely felt it, but it meant that this black hole was really exacerbated. And Labour's mistake was they didn't say, we won't undo that cut. That's probably very bad English. That was the mistake that Labour did, because then it tied their hands, because Theo makes a good point, as obviously the CBI do, that her danger is if she wallops business overly hard, then she's in danger of scuppering the whole of her economic policy, which is rightly about growth. Growth comes from British business and investment from overseas.
And then there's all the things that were impossible to plan for. So, for example, the Trump election, you know, the risk, I'm not saying we're about to go to war, but obviously the situation with Ukraine is becoming ever more tense, Theo.
Yes, I think the first thing is that when Labour went into the election, they were just so worried about the Conservative mantra that it's the same old Labour Party, tax and spend, and they wanted to portray themselves as being economically responsible. They could be trusted with the public finances, and that you weren't going to see your taxes go up if you voted for Labour. But that, as Anna said, you know, that ties, by making those promises, especially, of course, when you look around the borrowing rules as well, by tying her hands, Rachel Reeves has meant that she's had to look elsewhere for the money. And in actual fact, if you were to take her at her word, you know, going into the election not to increase national insurance, and then she's actually increased it for employers, then actually she's broken that promise. But I think the more important point, the more salient point is what Anna mentions, which is actually, if this government is going to be successful, it needs to pay for the public services in the medium to longer term, and there are some difficult decisions that are going to have to be made in the medium to longer term without increased tax revenues, then she's going to need economic growth. And that comes, like it or not, it doesn't come from government, it doesn't come from the man in Whitehall, it comes from people taking risks and people investing. And that's where you get economic growth.
But also government investment.
Yes.
And that's how she should be selling it to business, because that is what they are going to do. They are going to invest as well. And when you start to invest in infrastructure, that helps to generate growth. So I'm still with Rachel Reeves. I still back her, but she's no fool. She knows the risks that she runs. But as she says, what is the alternative?
And Theo, let's leave it there for now. Coming up, we'll also discuss this story on the Telegraph front that says ex-Met boss urges non-crime hate review.
Migrants risk their lives climbing aboard these trains in search of a dream, the United States.
It's really dangerous. They often get robbed on this train.
They suffer a lot by police, cartels.
What happens to them next, we just don't know. Do you miss your mum?
With Trump coming to the presidency, how much longer will people be accommodated?
The journey you've been through, it's been very difficult at times. Has it been worth it?
See.
This is a journey which goes by one name, the Beast.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict. There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach. I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it. This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board. So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board. This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse. We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first. Help is slowly reaching these places. It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust. This is a picture of destruction. Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me in the studio, Theo Usherwood and Anna Subri. Let's go straight to the front page of the Metro. One-word headline, enough. And it says, every 11 minutes, a woman or girl is killed in their own home. And now it's time for action to end what the Metro is calling an epidemic of violence. The numbers are shocking because I think it's also, is it 2 women a week, roughly, Anna, that are also killed?
Yes, and invariably they're killed by a partner, or an ex-partner, somebody they know. The other shocking statistic is that between 2018 and 2023, the Metro says, there was a 37% increase in crimes related to violence against women and girls. Look, as you know, I'm a criminal barrister, so I've come back to the bar, having been in Parliament, and one of the things that is really striking is the increase in these sorts of offences, an increase in assaults on partners in particular. And I'm all up for this campaign. It is a shocking epidemic and it needs sorting, but it won't get sorted when we've got the delays, the extraordinary delays that we have in the criminal justice system of bringing perpetrators to justice. If somebody's accused of murder, they'll be tried within 6 months because they'll be in custody. But if you're on bail, it can take literally years. It is unacceptable, and I'm afraid it's one of the things that this government's got to make a priority in terms of funding in order to shift this backlog, deliver justice and bring these stats down, because it's the only way to do it.
Can I just ask you, so we've seen this huge increase. Do you think that in part of it, it could be because more women are reporting these crimes?
It is, that definitely. There's a number of things. One, it's because people are reporting it. Secondly, it's taken far more seriously. It's taken very seriously, not just by the police, but the CPS, by social services. There have also been changes in what we call the charging standards. So we now have an offence of intentional strangulation. I think I voted for it. My memory and recollection was that it was not for the way that it's being charged. In the past, if somebody put their hands around somebody's throat, which is obviously very dangerous, he was tended to be charged as what we call a common assault. Maximum sentence, 6 months, can only be dealt with in the magistrate's court. Intentional strangulation, the Court of Appeal has said, one of the highest courts in the land, that should have a sentence of 18 months. Now, understandably, it is very serious if you put your hands around somebody's neck. So there's lots of different reasons why we've seen this increase. But I think we have, if we're being truthful and honest about this, I think we have got a problem with too many men who are still using their partners as punch bags, and we've got to stamp it out and make damn sure that their sons don't repeat these offences.
Yeah. And raising awareness like this campaign.
But we need more money in the criminal justice system to shift that backlog, bring people to justice.
Theo, let's go to the Daily Telegraph. Ex-Met boss commissioner urges non-crime hate review. This, of course, linked to the case of Alison Pearson, the Telegraph journalist.
Yes, so this is a report that's been done by the Policy Exchange think tank. It's a right-leaning think tank, and it's found that it's a recording of these non-crime hate incidents is now taking up 60,000 hours of officers' time every year. And of course, the argument is that it distracts them from fighting actual crime. Now, Lord Hogan Howe, of course, was the Metropolitan Police Commissioner going back 8-10 years, if my memory recalls rightly, said the government should now, this is according to the Telegraph, consider whether actually the police should be investigating these incidents at all. Now, these aren't crimes, and of course, this report comes off the back of this, you can only call it a botched investigation into Alison Pearson, the Telegraph journalist. She was visited at her home on Remembrance Sunday by Essex Police and asked about a social media post that was over a year old, and then they subsequently dropped the investigation. And I think Keir Starmer's made the point as Prime Minister that, you know, the police need to focus on the crimes that matter to people: burglary, robbery. You know, what we've been discussing on the front of the...
Yeah, but don't forget hate crime in Nottinghamshire. They absolutely specifically went for this sort of behaviour, not the Alison Pearson nonsense.
Yeah.
And actually, it did have an impact on the way that men and boys behaved. Just a small point.
OK, sorry, 20 seconds, front page of The Sun, 30 years of shirt Bobby Moore's missing. But
so now we come to the really important news, ladies and gentlemen, and that is that the shirt that Bobby wore back in 1966, when we won the World Cup, went missing from his ex-wife's home in Essex 30 years ago, and apparently, it's been found somewhere in Wales, and it's worth £1 million. OK. Apparently, says The Sun.
I can see people paying £1 million for it. Just got to be real.
Do you think this is true, though, for you?
Yeah, of course it is.
Anyway, on that note, Anna, Theo, thank you very much. And coming up next on Sky News at 11, the latest updates as Storm Bert sweeps across much of the country with hundreds of flood warnings and alerts in place tonight. We'll have all the details at the top of the hour.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometres away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.